Story 1. Am I the a-hole for boarding the plane and leaving without my wife? Sorry ahead of time for the length of this one, but there are a lot of key details I think are important. I know how this sounds, but hear me out. This is also not my usual account, but I don't want to risk my wife seeing this, as it's currently a sensitive subject. My wife, female 43, and I, male 47, have a daughter, female 21, who goes to college out of state. We will call my wife Meg and my daughter Jess. Jess is in her junior year of college. Over the summer, she was employed by her university and was able to stay in the dorms. After summer, she was moving out of the dorms and into her own apartment off campus. Meg and I live in the PNW. Jess goes to school on the East Coast. We usually go to visit Jess a couple of times throughout the semester, typically parents' weekend and move-out day. She also comes home during the holidays. Let me start by saying that traveling with my wife is not a great experience. I am very type A. I like to have everything organized and make sure that we get there when we need to be early, especially when traveling. My wife is the opposite, very go with the flow, and we will get there when we get there. I do my best to meet in the middle, but not when traveling by plane. Last year, during Parents' Weekend, Meg and I were going to fly out to see Jess. Our flight was at 10 a.m. Our airport isn't huge, but not a tiny airport either. I told my wife that we need to be at the airport 90 minutes early, and we live about 30 minutes from the airports. This being said, I wanted to leave at the very latest by 8, since we would also need to park and walk a little bit. I, of course, got up at 6 to make sure everything was ready and accounted for. My wife does not like to get up early. It took me attempting to wake her up 5 times before she eventually got up at 7:40, then wanted to make coffee, shower, and eat a bowl of cereal. Let's just say we didn't leave the house until 9. It ended up being busier at the airport than normal, likely due to many colleges having parents' weekends, and it took so long to get through security that we missed our flight. Rightly so. The airline refused to refund our ticket. We were able to get new tickets, but not until the next day, and missed Friday afternoon and Saturday morning with our daughter. Jess was disappointed, to say the least. Fast forward to now. We were flying down for a long weekend to help her move. We take one flight from our town to a bigger town nearby, then fly from there to my daughter's college town. Again, it was a long morning of me pushing my wife to get her to move along. Due to the last airport mishap, I wanted to make sure I told her we needed to leave extra early so as to not miss the flight again. We got there on time, with a bit of time to spare, and my wife was annoyed, kept going on about how now we just have to sit and wait for 45 minutes for them to start boarding. We took our first flight and landed in the connecting city, at a much larger airport. We only had about 1 hour layover. We got off the plane at 9:15, and our next plane started boarding at 9:40. We had to take multiple rails to get from where we landed to our terminal. We got to our terminal and had about 15 minutes until our plane was set to board. My wife tells me that she wants to get coffee. There was a little market next to our terminal that sold hot food and coffee. I asked if she wanted me to go grab it for her. "No, I want Starbucks," she said. Well, Starbucks was a rail ride away and a little bit of a walk. I told her we couldn't do that. We didn't have enough time. She stated that we had enough time, and if I wouldn't go with her, she would go by herself. I tried to discourage her, but she was determined. She walked away, at a brisk pace for her, and said she would be back in time. 15 minutes went by, and she was nowhere to be seen. They started calling boarding groups. I called my wife, hoping she was nearby, but she didn't answer. They called a few groups, then called ours. In a panic, I called my wife again, 3 times. Finally, on the last call, she answered and said she was on her way. It was a long line and she had to wait a bit. I told her they were almost done with boarding and she needed to hurry up. I walked by the gate, but the attendant said they would need to shut the gate in 2 minutes. I waited by the gate. I waited and waited but she didn't show up. The attendant asked if I wanted to board, otherwise she would have closed the gate. I tried to plead with her to wait a couple of minutes, but she insisted that she couldn't. So I boarded the plane. A few minutes later, my wife called me saying the attendant won't let her on. They had already removed the boarding ramp at that point. She told me I needed to tell them to let me off the plane to be with her, and I said no. It's not fair to do this again to Jess. I said I told you we didn't have time, but you decided to go anyway. I told her to go purchase a new ticket for the next flight and I would see her when she arrives. She got to Jess's school and seemed unbothered by the whole situation and didn't even really talk about it. I thought maybe she realized it was her fault and just wanted to drop it. Boy, was I wrong. We are now home and she hasn't talked to me since the trip, over a week ago, and is insisting that I am an a-hole. So am I the a-hole? No. Yeah, you can have a we get there when we get there kind of attitude about a lot of stuff, and you can go with the flow, but you're dealing with the airport. You have to adjust to it. And going to get a certain kind of coffee, it just kind of feels kind of selfish. This is your daughter you're talking about. You've already disappointed for Parents' Weekend. Why would you do that again? I think there are some things that you do to make sure that you see your kids when you need to see your kids.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 2. Hold me back a year in high school over a single gym credit? How about I go to college a year early instead? I hated gym class. Not because of the physical activity. I was in hockey and football. But there wasn't enough time to shower before the bell. So you stink to high heaven for the rest of the day. So I would walk the track with all the girls. Ticked off my coaches something awful. So they flunk me in my junior year and won't let me double up my senior year, so I would have to stay back. I had already picked out my college and was accepted, tech school. Just had to finish my senior year. So I figured I could work something out with the guidance counselor and the coach. Nope, neither would budge. Okay, I walk away thinking I'm boned and have to basically take one class my second senior year. Then it dawns on me. Can I just start going to college now? Are there other alternatives? So I called my college admissions and college guidance counselor, explained my situation and what other options are available. Since this is a non-traditional school, no SATs, you can start without a diploma. The caveat is you must have one or equivalent to get your diploma. The state I'm from, they don't distinguish between the two, so it won't be an issue later on. So I called another meeting hoping the high school admin would change their minds. No joy. They stuck to their guns. Thinking they had me cornered, I stood up and said, well, I'm just going to have to drop out then. I can't see missing a year of college to just do gym class. The coach thinks he's all cute and is, you can't go to college without a diploma. I relay what the tech school admin and guidance told me of their policy on this. Faces dropped. It set into the guidance counselor that a dropout looks bad on her and the school, small school, when the state audits. She started backpedaling, and I wasn't hearing any of it. Later on that night, the principal and vice principal called to talk. I wasn't interested. I was all excited about starting classes in the fall. Too long didn't read. My high school tried to hold me back a year for one gym credit. I was already enrolled in a non-traditional tech college. Tech college would let me start classes as long as I got my GED prior to graduation. So I quit high school, looks bad on the school admin, and got my degree a year earlier. Yeah, way to go. Holding back on a gym credit. Gym. Holding back on gym. If it were anything else, like English, math, something like that, maybe your understanding on the situation, but not gym. No, that's good. Fight for your education, the one you want. Story 3. Entitled aunt tried to barge into my room while I was changing and banged her head against the door. My crazy entitled aunt, whom you all know so well by now, had an annoying habit, one of her more annoying habits, to just storm in when I was changing my clothes. The door would be closed, and if it wasn't locked, she would just let herself in. My protest that I may be in a state of undress fell on deaf ears, as did any insistence that she knock before entering, like a civilized human being. The following incidents happened when I was either 18 or 19. Aunt and her husband were over for a visit. I was in my room changing my clothes. My bedroom door has a small defect. It wouldn't lock properly. So any time it was closed, my dad, stepmom, and stepbrother would either knock or ask if they could come in. Not entitled aunt, of course. She considered herself above such frivolous courtesies. She could come into our rooms as she saw fit, and mere mortals would just have to live with it. Unfortunately for her, this mere mortal had had enough of her privacy being invaded. My top was off when I heard the door begin to crack open. I yelled, "I'm changing! Wait outside!" As expected, Aunt didn't listen and was about to stick her head in when I swiftly reached for the door, pulled it back a little, and slammed it hard into Aunt's thick skull. Not enough to crack her skull, but enough to hurt. Aunt let out a howl that instantly brought a smile to my face. She went downstairs whining. I followed. She yelled at my dad about what I had done. My dad and uncle, Aunt's husband, were drinking at the time and were uncharacteristically chilled. Dad just looked at her, then looked at me and said something like, "Yeah, don't do that." My uncle just burst out laughing as if his wife getting her head banged was the funniest thing he had ever heard. Such dismissal of her grievances was too much to bear for my aunt. She demanded that they leave immediately. Uncle told her he was in no condition to drive. Besides, he and my dad were going to watch a cricket match, so leaving was out of the question. Aunt dialed my cousin's number, believing wholeheartedly that her son would come to her aid. But judging from her end of the conversation, the cousin was out with his friends and wasn't going to drive all the way over to deal with her stupid butt, and why couldn't she just stop getting into unnecessary squabbles? Aunt had no options left. She just sat down on the couch while holding against her head the ice pack my stepmom had bought for her. Her anger was boiling over, but was completely ignored by my happy dad and uncle. It was a lovely evening. I mean, you've heard about the phrase, "This information needs to get needs to get banged into your thick skull, needs to make its way into your thick skull," something like that. And little bit literal in this sense. I think at this point, you just need to spring for a lock for your side of the door and have the aunt pay for it, basically. That's all you got to do.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.